My name's Pam Whitehead. I'm the Executive Director of ProLove Ministries, and this is our first webcast with our affiliates, so we're excited. We thank you for your grace in all of this. Let's see. So ProLove Ministries, our website is proloveministries.org. And our hope is to bring new ideas to solve old problems. And part of the way that we do that is we're uniting the organizations within the pro-life movement to work for one purpose. So we want to be of one mind, one heart, and one purpose. And ultimately, most of us who are in pro-life work, our goal is to make abortion unthinkable, right? But the way that we do that may look different for each individual organization. Each of us has a different vision, has a different purpose. We have a different mission, but all together we make up a movement, a body that works together for this same purpose. And so what we recognized at ProLove Ministries is that there are gaps in the movement that need to be filled. And so we decided that we wanted to come alongside and support organizations who were doing the work to fill the gaps. And the way that God has weaved this, he's made a beautiful tapestry of affiliates of organizations who are all serving populations of people who have been underserved, unseen, or even misrepresented in the pro-life movement, or even weren't being served at all before these organizations came along. So we're excited today to be joined by Abiding Love Adoptions, and we're going to have a conversation. And we hope that you all will lean in and listen in. We know that many people have an opinion on adoption, but we decided that we wanted to hear from some people who work in this field every single day. People that I would consider to be experts because they do this every day. This is their life's work. This is what they do. So, Carrie, I'm really going to start with you. We're going to jump right in. So I'd love it if you'd introduce yourself first. Tell us who you are and your credentials, kind of what qualifies you, and then we'll go from there.
Now, we're so excited. Thank you so much. And we're so honored to be a part of the ProLove Ministries. And I love how y'all have all come together, and it is a tapestry, and we're filling in those gaps. And so we, Vicki and I with Abiding Love, we're just honored. I'm Carrie Murray Nellis. I'm Executive Director of Abiding Love. Vicki and I really run it together. And I'm also an attorney. Don't hold it against me. You know, it's funny, when I was growing up, my kids, my sisters and I always said I was going to be a missionary. And then I got married, and I woke up one day and I woke my husband up and I said, I think God's telling me to go to law school. And he said, oh, good, me too. So like normal people, we quit our jobs and went to law school. And so my sisters were like, well, I thought you were going to be a missionary. And so God can use your tent making abilities. And that's the catalyst that got us to Abiding Love. But I am an adoption attorney. I've been an attorney for 15 years. And I kept seeing more and more of a trend as the internet has blown up and changed the way that the adoption works, that expectant moms and birth moms were not being cared for. They were not seeing people with their agency or attorney face to face. They were not being cared for. This was a transaction and not a relationship. And if I could shout from the highest mountain that adoption is not a transaction, it is a relationship, and it doesn't end at placement. Honestly, I love how Vicki always says that's when our work really begins. And so I love that. So Abiding Love came in because I kept saying, God, you've got to provide an agency to fill in this gap, to be there. And he said, yeah, I called you. So, you know, what we do is we are here for the expectant mom, the birth mom. That is our focus. We are unashamed about it. You know, one of the first ministry calls we had with ProLove Ministries is all of us together. You asked us, what is our greatest weakness? What is our greatest strength? And our greatest weakness and our greatest strength really is the same. We are all about the expectant mom, and we get criticized because we aren't loving or supportive enough to adoptive parents, and then we get criticized from the other end. So, but that's us. So I'm also a social worker. So, I'm kind of that double thing, but honored to be here today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And you shared a little bit about the mission of Abiding Love Adoptions, that you specialize in domestic infant adoption. And your website is abidingloveadopt.com.
Yes.
abidingloveadopt.com. And so your mission, as it states, is that you are loving and supporting the birth mother throughout the open adoption process. And so, Vicki, we're going to introduce you in just a moment, but just for a second, Carrie, looking at that mission, and just in case someone's looking at your website right now, let's unpack a little bit of what is in that mission, because it's easy to sit here and assume that people know what that means. Yeah. And some people think they know what that means. But I would love it if you could unpack that a little bit, because it's been my experience in pro-life work that everybody doesn't understand what some of those terms mean. So why don't you go for it?
Okay, hot seat. So the big thing really is being focused on the expectant mom and birth mom. We want her voice to be heard. So much in the adoption process, it's about the adoptive parents. And please know, we have nothing against adoptive parents. We love adoptive parents. Our mission is expectant parents. And so we want to educate about open adoption. Adoption is completely different than it was in kind of the closed era, where women didn't get to choose the family. They didn't get to have a relationship with the adoptive parents. And the studies have shown that we failed these moms, and we failed the adoptees as well. So what we really embrace is open adoption, and what that allows, and open adoption is open to different interpretations. One open adoption is going to be different than the other, but we want really, and our symbol is an olive tree. And we love that, and that was purposeful, because it's really 2 or 3 families, 2 or 3 trees coming together and engrafting into one. And so we say it's one big family, where it's a real relationship between the adoptive parents and the expectant parents. And an expectant mom, just so we can educate and y'all can hear all the different terms, we're going to say expectant mom if she has not signed surrender paperwork or relinquishment. Some states call that consents. We call her an expectant mom, because she could still choose to parent. We want to make sure that, she's got support long before she makes the decision to place. That means talking about grief. That means talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of adoption. Everybody wants to think that adoption is sunshine and roses, and it is quite the opposite. Walking alongside these women, we want to have a real relationship. I mean, you can tell, well, Vicki's skinny, I'm not. So we do a lot of eating, because we're Southern women, and we really believe we can sit down at the Waffle House and we can get down to what's going on and be real, because that's what it is about. So that's way before placement. We want to be there at the time of placement. If that means being at the hospital the entire time that she's there, we'll do that. I mean, because a lot of women don't have anybody to help them to the bathroom, in the middle of the night. We want to be able to do that. And then also post, we have 5, right now we have 5 birth mother support groups going on across Georgia and Alabama. We just got licensed in Florida, so we're getting our feet under us there, and can't wait to grow that. But we believe in it. It's a long-term relationship with these women.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I froze up for a second, so I'm not sure. Did you explain what open adoption means?
Yep. Yeah, we made it clear that our interpretation of open adoption might be a little different than others, but we are who we are.
Yeah, so. That's right. That's right. So Vicki, we're going to move over to you. I would love for you to share your title, your credentials, and then what your role is at Abiding Love Adoption.
Okay. Well, I am Vicki Coles, and I have been actually an adoptive mom for 17 and a half years. I am the director of birth parent advocacy at Abiding Love, and I have a team of women who are mission-minded, who love the women that God puts in our lives, whether they choose to parent or create a plan. Credentials-wise, I do have a master's in counseling. Well, and we do that, like Carrie talked about. We do a lot of kind of pre-grief counseling, if that makes sense. our biggest goal is to make sure that if a woman, this is the path that she wants to take, that she goes into it to the best of our ability with her eyes wide open. Like Carrie said, it's not sunshines and rainbows. Adoption is typically born out of brokenness, and brokenness of the woman, brokenness of the adoptive mom, brokenness of family, broken promises. I mean, you name it. It's usually born out of brokenness. And not every woman that we talk to creates a plan. It's just not what happens. And that's okay too. I would rather, if she's not called to do it and this is not what she feels like she can stand in for the rest of her life, she shouldn't do it. She should, and we try to help, we partner her with resources that if she chooses to parent. We are not the parenting experts. One of the things that we try to do is stay in our lane. I think that's what makes a tapestry so strong, is that you can all have a central thread, and Christ is our thread. But we all have gifts. Sometimes, somebody's the arm, sometimes somebody's the foot, sometimes somebody's the head, and sometimes somebody's the tail. But, it is what it is. And so we like to stay in our lane.
Me again? Is that me?
No. But we like to stay in our lane. So when we have someone who's really interested in parenting, then I'll be honest, the very first thing I do is try to connect them with a pregnancy resource center in their area. And if I can't find somebody to do that with, then we refer to ProLove Ministries. And so that's our first priority. And then our focus, like I said, it's really about women. I think being an adoptive mom, God, a long time ago, I will never forget the very first time I saw my first son and holding him, and my heart just went out to his birth mom, like in a way I can't explain. Because I was just like, if somebody now came into my life and took him from me, and I never got to know anything about him, it would crush me. And so from that moment forward, I made every effort I could. I like to tell people I was doing open adoption before it was cool, to find his Hawaiian family, to find his roots, and make sure that they always knew he was safe, he was loved. And anytime that they wanted to know about him and talk to him, or vice versa, we had that door open. And it really, just like I said, stemmed from my love for him. I just couldn't imagine being the woman on the other side and not having a clue what was going on with my son.
And I love that, Vicki. I think one of the things, I've been in relationship with Abiding Love Adoption since right after you all started. And that relationship has grown, and it grew through doing this work together. We actually really deepened our relationship through a mom who needed your help. And it was a decision that she made. And so once she made that decision, really my hope was to put her in the hands of the people who could help her and empower her even further. And you all did that. I think one of the most beautiful things about Abiding Love Adoptions is the way that you care, the depth of your care. And that really has attracted me to you. And it is so different, unfortunately, from the way that adoption has been represented. Let me say that, because it's been represented that way in the pro-life movement. I don't know that necessarily all the agencies are actually presenting the way that they have been perceived. And so, in that, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this webcast is kind of like an adoption 101, really. Much of the work that we do, that you ladies do, that many of us do in the pro-life movement, especially right now, is on the internet. And so there are conversations that are being had constantly. Every day, people are talking, and some of the things that I do, I'm an advocate for women in many different ways, basically women in crisis. And a lot of times I will post a prayer request, or I will, share something about a woman who is in the valley of decision. And oftentimes I get these comments back, or I'll get direct messages or private messages from people saying, I'll take her baby. Or, even messages from pro-abortion people who maybe say, why are you pressuring this woman to have this child? How many children have you adopted? And so some of what we want to do today is kind of unpack some of those things and, share with people, what should we say? What should we not say? What conversations should we take the bait on, and which ones should we let loose? So things get cast at us all the time. We have to determine how we're going to respond, and that's really all that we can control. So
but I think I'm sorry, just from what you said before I forget, like when people say, I'll take her baby, if she doesn't want her baby, I'll take her baby, that kind of thing. I want to go on the record right now. I've been doing this for almost 13 years. And like I said, I've been an adoptive mom for 17 and a half. And I've never met anybody who didn't want their baby. Now, have I met people who were scared to death? Have I met people who were in some horrible situations? Yes. But I've never met anybody who didn't want their baby from a perfect world. And so, that's just something that I kind of want to put to bed before we start. Because even if she's going to the abortion clinic, it's not necessarily because she doesn't want her baby, it's because she's scared. Something's going on and she's scared. And so we kind of need to deal, and we all know that fear is from the enemy. And if you're listening to this and you're not a Christian, well, I'm sorry, but fear is from the enemy. And so, it makes you do crazy things. And so, anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Pam, but
that's okay.
That's kind of one of my biggest pet peeves is people automatically assume if she's making an adoption or she's having an abortion, she doesn't want her baby.
Right.
And I'm like, it really, that has nothing to do with, from my experience. Now, I can't say that every woman's not like that, but from my experience, that doesn't have a lot to do with why she's making choices that she's making.
And you're right. It's very rare that I encounter a woman in front of an abortion facility who wants to kill her baby as people scream at her. So, what you're saying is along the same lines. That is, the pregnancy is not the crisis. That's really what it comes back to. The pregnancy is a precipitating factor. The crisis was already there before she got pregnant. And so what we have to determine is, what is the crisis? This is in my line of work. I have to determine what is her crisis and what can I do to help solve it? What can we alleviate? What do we have to walk with her through? And then let her decide what she wants to get out of, what decisions she wants to make. So one of the common comments or statements that we hear from people all the time is the "I'll take your baby." The other one is, what about all the kids in foster care? Okay. And Vicki, Vicki, I want you to talk about this a little bit. Why aren't we helping all these kids in foster care? Why aren't we adopting all these children in foster care? And so I was a foster kid. I was never adopted. And so I really would love it if you, and again, Abiding Love Adoptions is a domestic infant adoption agency. Let me preface this with that. They're a domestic infant adoption agency. And so, Vicki, I know you've worked a lot in foster care. Carrie, you as well. You may want to chime in on this, but I would really love your perspective on this and, kind of debunk some of this myth about that we can adopt all the kids that are in foster care. So,
well, first of all, the purpose of foster care is reunification. That is the purpose. When it started out way back when, it was
the back. Shout that louder. Shout it louder.
The purpose of it, like I said, and like Carrie said, it's reunification. It's not to be a private adoption agency for people who want to take advantage of somebody in a weak position.
Let me ask Carrie a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Really quickly. So from a legal standpoint, can you talk to us about what it would mean to adopt a child from foster care?
Well, and just to give you some background, when I really started out as an attorney, I, cut my teeth in juvenile court representing parents against defects and as a guardian ad litem. And for those that don't know a guardian ad litem is the attorney for the child. So mom and dad have their attorney. If they cannot afford an attorney is going to be appointed for them. And then DFACS has what we call a SAG, a Special Assistant Attorney General. The state has an attorney that represents them. So a guardian ad litem is an attorney for the child looking out for their best interests. And that's actually how Vicki and I met, because she was working at another agency and she was a caseworker, and that mom had a case with her child that was born at that point, and I was her attorney in court for juvenile court. That's how we met. But the whole purpose of this is mom is given, when a child goes into custody, mom and dad are given a list of things they have to do, and there's a time period that they are supposed to be doing those things, and if they don't do it, then their rights are going to be terminated. Every state has a different time period. I always loved, as an attorney, and I still do, when people come in and they're at the beginning of their adoption journey and they sit there and say, okay, I want to adopt, but I can't afford adoption, so I'm going to become a foster parent. So how do I do that? And I'm like, oh, hold on. If you are going to adopt, do not become a foster parent. That is not the calling of a foster parent. A calling of a foster parent is to reunify mom and dad. The calling of a foster parent is to be on the sidelines, cheering them on when they pass their drug screens, when they finish parenting class, when they show up for parenting classes. That is their job. And I really do feel, I know that we in the pro-life world get flack for this whole, well, you aren't adopting children out of foster care, but I really do think we are doing a great job with more and more people who are getting the mission of foster care and getting into the mission of foster care. And I do feel like over the last 15 years, I've seen a huge, huge difference between the number of foster parents that we have, and we need more, and them getting the mission of it. You know, I am an attorney and I finalize a lot of adoptions for foster parents. And so I'm probably going to make a lot of people mad, but you know, like Vicki said, foster care is not a private adoption agency. It is a place for us to be cheering on these women and men. And it's such a great opportunity to share Christ that way. I mean, and to build that bridge. But that is not, it's not an adoption agency.
So one of the things too, you hit on it for just a moment, but let's talk about the cost of adoption. Because I see this a lot with pro-life people. You know, they'll say, well, I would adopt, but it just costs too much money. And so, you know, and then of course, you know, people get criticized for not adopting the babies, and, you know, people will come back and say, well, how much does it cost to raise a child? You know, this kind of thing. And so what we end up doing is haggling the price of life. And I personally don't think that's a good witness. I think that we need to recognize and understand that people are watching, people are reading, and people are listening. And your audience is wider and broader than you actually realize. And the influence that you have is greater than you even know, especially if you identify as a pro-life advocate. So let's talk a little bit about the cost of adoption. You know, what does it cost the birth mother? What does it cost the hopeful adoptive parents? What does it cost the taxpayer? And then should we even be talking about the price? Is that important? So Carrie, can you hit on that?
Yeah, it's expensive. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to try to spin it. It's expensive. You know, Vicki and I for years have tried to do everything we can to make it less expensive. I think one of the unique things about our model is I am an attorney, so we're able to kind of cut attorney costs because we can get all of that done. The Georgia Bar does want me to make a disclosure that you are not required to use me as your adoption attorney. So I did my disclosure, thanks to the Georgia Bar. But at any rate, you know, I think what a lot of people don't realize is all the time and effort. As an adoption agency, there are adoption agencies out there that are charging $45,000, $50,000, $60,000, and they have never met that mama in person. And to me, I got a problem with that. And that's one of the reasons we started Abiding Love, because as an attorney, I was seeing that because I get the statement of fees, and I was showing up at the hospital to take her surrender or consent, and I was the first person she ever met in person. And I'm sitting there flabbergasted in the hospital room. She just had a baby. I, the attorney, am walking in and I'm the first person. That is wrong. And all of the communication is via text or email, or even maybe via Skype or FaceTime or Zoom, but no real person interaction. And I think one of the things we're really seeing in this time period that we're in with the COVID is in-person interaction is really important. So yeah, so I would say the average for a domestic adoption is going to be somewhere between, I would say, $40,000 and $50,000. Every state has different rules. Every state has different rules regarding birth mother expenses. Every state has different rules about what agencies can charge, what attorneys can charge. But you know, if it's done right, there's a reason. And a lot of people don't understand the red tape regarding the adoptive family. And I'll let Vicki talk about the birth mother expenses. But, you know, we've got to get a home study. And we take very seriously all that we've got to do with the home study. And especially because of when we're staring an expectant mom in the eyes and saying, this is different than foster care, because a lot of the women we have dealt with, we're working with, have been through foster care and were abused. And so we're having to explain the differences. We do federal background checks. We do local background checks. We do state background checks. We do city background checks. We do child abuse registries, sex offender. So that's one of the other reasons. But when adoption is done right, there's a lot of time that goes into it. And I can't say that adoption is done right all the time. There's a lot of agencies out there that are acting illegally in states that they aren't licensed in, and they are just having a relationship via Skype and text messages. And we get a lot of flack because we really don't think that's ethical, because we really believe in the one face-to-face interaction.
Well, and as far as birth mother goes, what we do for them, it's no cost to them at all. The way adoption is set up, everybody knows that adoptive parents pay the placement fee. And so, because people ask, well, if you don't have a list of waiting families at Abiding Love, how do y'all get paid? And one, we ride on a lot of faith. And then two, we just believe that we don't need to be taking money from anybody until an official match has been made. I am slow to match. I'm not slow, you know, and my team is slow to match. Abiding Love is slow to match. And the reason for that is not because we're not wanting her to build a relationship, because that's like the opposite of it. But we just want to make sure that this is what she wants to do. Because if you don't, and then you get matched with somebody, then you may not go through with it, because now you've bonded with somebody and you're like, well, I'm going to hurt them if I don't go through with it. And so we're just we try to be really slow about that. But to a birth mom, it doesn't cost her anything. I come to her, my counseling is free, my advocate's counseling is free. We pay for professional counseling. That is all free to her. And not that we are not qualified to counsel, it's just sometimes, and when we get to meet, we work with somebody, they start to unpack things that they're going to need a lot more than what we can give. And they need people specifically trained in trauma or whatever it is. And so we try to connect them to that. I think it's important. Taxpayers, the only thing taxpayers are involved in is if you are adopting, you get a tax credit, which Carrie can, you know, somebody really wants to know a lot more about that. But so taxpayers really aren't involved in private adoption at all. Why do the hopeful adoptive parents foot the whole bill? Because honestly, that's what's going to happen if you come to Abiding Love. You're going to get a fee. That fee covers our placement fee. It covers it covers birth mother expenses. I have adopted 3 times. I have been nickel and dimed to death. And I mean, what I say by that is, like, they don't tell you what birth mother expenses are. And then all of a sudden you get a bill for a hospital bill of $4,000. Or then you get like her rent bill for, you know, $1,800. And then I get like, oh, you need to pay for her medicine, and that's $50. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And so when we started, and I mean, I was getting bills, and with one, I got bills like 6 months later because the hospital just decided to process the payment. And I was like, I thought I was done. And then all of a sudden we had to refinance my husband's car to pay that bill. And so one of the things that when we started Abiding Love, we've come up with a flat fee. So what we do is we charge that flat fee with every adoptive couple no matter the situation. So if I'm working with somebody that's homeless, I'm working with somebody who's got a master's degree and is 44 years old, we charge that flat fee. And that's where we actually get a lot of our flack. It's not necessarily the placement fee. It's more the birth mother expenses. I think we get a lot more flack on, because people want me to itemize that. And I'm like, I'm not doing that ahead of time, because one, I don't know what she's going to need. Two, the reason we chose to do a flat fee is that if your birth mom goes over that amount, we don't come back and ask you for any money. That's mine and Carrie's problem. And so if we have a mom who calls us 3 years later and there's money in that account and she needs deep therapy that's going to take 20 sessions, I've got money sitting there to pay for her 3 years later. And so that's how we chose to do it. Adoption is expensive, but like Carrie said, we really try. I mean, we could give you example after example of women that we've worked with that even are, like she said, late in their pregnancy, and I've spent 200 hours with them. I mean, and because you can't love on somebody if you don't build a relationship. And so what adoptive parents are paying for, in my opinion, when you pay for that placement fee, is you pay to love the woman who's placing her child with you. You pay to take care of her. You pay to take care and make sure that she is emotionally, to the best of our ability, she is emotionally stable, that she has somebody if she needs to call at 3 o'clock in the morning and cuss me up one side and down the other. She has the complete freedom to do that I'm going to take that phone call. If she's mad at you, she can take it up with me, and maybe it's just because she's having a bad day and she's not really mad at you at all. But she takes that up with me or one of my advocates or Carrie instead of calling you and messing up a relationship. But essentially, when you pay that placement fee, you're paying to take care of that mama, and you're paying to tell your child that you did everything you could to make sure that his or her mama was as healthy and taken care of as you possibly could. So I don't know, that's my explanation, but go ahead, Carrie.
One of the things I want to say about birth mother expenses is this, and every state is different. There are some states where it is completely okay that once mom signs, they give them an envelope full of cash or a check. There's some states that you can do that before. We do not do that. If there's rent, we pay directly to the landlord. If it's a phone bill, we pay directly to the phone bill. If it's power, we pay directly to the power utilities. There is a receipt for everything. And so with the courts, we do have to give, with ICPC and with the courts, we have to give a statement and accounting. And Vicki can tell you I'm really annoying to all of our advocates because I want a receipt for everything. But I never want someone to say that they were induced to make an adoption plan over a latte. I mean, so I disclose it all, and we put it in there, and we have all of those receipts. But every agency does that, and that's a good thing for people to be asking when they're working with an agency is, how do you do birth mother expenses? Do you give them cash? Do you give them a check? For me as an attorney, I think that's inducement. I just never could dream of doing that, setting aside even just the ethical issues of it, but that's an accepted practice in many states. So, but birth mother expenses, that's how that works.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating on that. I really appreciate it. And when you talk about coercion and some of the things that we've already spoken about, like some of the direct messages that we get, or people saying, I'll take her baby, or even people honestly sending us messages saying, I've already got a home study and I'm vetted and I'm ready. And, there's just such desperation there for some hopeful adoptive parents who, and I believe many of them are well-meaning. One of the things that at ProLove Ministries, one of the things that we talk about all the time, you all talk about it, every one of our affiliates talks about it, is focusing on the woman. And for so long, for so many years in this movement, we've been focused on babies. And what that's done is it's put us behind. We've become reactive rather than proactive. And so we want to shift that. We want to change that. And you all are changing the culture of what adoption looks like, which is why you are an affiliate with ProLove Ministries. We would love to see more of this model across the country. And so with that being said, you know, Abiding Love Adoptions is an affiliate of ProLove Ministries. And if you have questions that we don't get answered on this webcast, because we're going to do this for about 15 more minutes, if you have questions and you're watching, you can put it in the chat box and one of them will answer. Some of them we may speak about out loud, but everyone can read in the chat box. If you look in the bottom footer of your Zoom frame there, you should be able to see the chat box. You can put a question in that chat box and one of us will answer it. One of them, not me. I'm not an adoption professional. And that's another thing, you know, that I remind people all the time. I am not an advocate for adoption. And you all are not per se advocates for adoption. You're not out here selling adoption to people. And like Vicki said from the beginning, adoption is born out of brokenness. And when a woman places a child for adoption, there's a loss, you know, and I think so often that gets forgotten. And with that, you know, I really want to shift gears for a moment and talk about whether or not you believe or you think that adoption is the answer to the abortion issue. You know, presenting adoption to a woman who's about to make a decision about whether or not she's going to have an abortion, you know, her options abortion, adoption, and parenting, or what are her options? How do you define that? So many people, we see the language that's being used, take, give up, it's all inconsiderate in a lot of ways. And so, you know, when people are talking about this, one of the things they say, well, you can give your baby up for adoption. You don't have to kill it. So who wants to take that? Vicki or Carrie, who wants to talk first?
It's really tough because I think you have to stop and you have to talk to her. I think you can't just all of a sudden say adoption is the alternative to abortion. Because you've got to know what's going on with her. I mean, if she's willing to open up with you and tell you something, then that's when you lean into the discernment of the spirit to kind of lead a direction. But to have this like pat answer, women are already, from what I understand, from women that I've counseled who've already had abortions, and Pat could probably give us a lot more detail on this, or someone who's had an abortion, they already feel guilty enough about going there. And then once they make eye contact with you, they almost feel even more shame. And so when you're saying, oh, I'll take your baby, you don't have to kill it, all you're doing is adding more shame. You know, Carrie, feel free to jump in, but
one of the things I'd like to say is I feel like if a woman is there at an abortion clinic, she's in crisis.
Yeah.
And we never can make decisions, we should never make a decision when we are in crisis. We've got to stabilize her. And that means unpacking, like you said, unpacking what is going on, what are the fears, why are we looking to make this decision, and then let's explore, let's back it up, and then let's explore the options. And so when I feel like when someone's outside an abortion clinic saying, I want to adopt your baby, it's like, well, hold on, we're putting the cart, you know, before the horse, because we've got to stabilize her. We've got to love her. I'm not an advocate for adoption. I'm an advocate for loving her big and well. And so that's what we need to be doing. And outside an abortion clinic is not a time where we should be sitting here saying, oh, let me take your baby. It's a time for us saying, I don't know what you're going through, but I love you, and we can connect you with people who can try to help you figure out what is going on, and to be loving. You know, Vicki and I, we've gotten some flack because in Alabama we're licensed, and in Alabama the law is that abortion clinics should give 3 referrals out other than abortion. Well, guess what? Vicki and I want to be one of those referrals, right? So Vicki and I went like crazy people and walked into the abortion clinics to say, hey, we're Carrie and Vicki, how you doing? And our normal self, because they're people. I mean, they're awesome people that just don't, they got blinders on. And so, and we were called horrible things outside the abortion clinic. Our car was videotaped, the license plate put out. I was told I was a whore, all these things. And what we need to be doing is unpacking the crisis, loving well, whether that's adoption, if that's parenting, if that's connecting people. But that's what the body of Christ is about. That's what ProLove Ministries is doing. We are that tapestry. We are saying, okay, this person is an expert in after abortion recovery. This person is an expert in adoption education. This person is an expert in birth mothers and birth mother grief and working through, and then, putting those together, we have got to stay in our lanes. And so when we have women and other families out there with their signs, I know you mean well, and I know you do, but we're not loving her. It's about the baby, and we've got to love her big and well.
It comes back to finding out who we are in her life, right? Who am I in her life? What place do I hold? Am I just a stranger, or am I even willing to get to know her before I'm trying to guide her toward this life and death decision? And so for me, what it comes down to when a woman is contemplating abortion, her options are life and death. She has to decide first, this baby is going to live, before I can ever determine what her parenting options are after that. And so, like you said, Carrie, we are a lot of times, many people are putting the cart before the horse. Well-meaning people, loving people, Christian people who love God and they want to love her. But, that's why we're here. That's why we sit in these seats. That's why we talk about these things. And I am a birth mother. It's not something that I talk about very often. My adoption was unconventional. It wasn't the same. I actually parented for a while and then surrendered my rights in recognizing, like Vicki was talking about, that I was not in a position to be parenting. I was an addict and an alcoholic and all of those things. And and I'm a woman who's had an abortion, and that behavior carried on. I not once, and this is why we sit here and talk about this, in all of that brokenness throughout all of that time, was there anyone telling me that I could do something? Everyone reminded me of what I couldn't do. And so it's so important to understand that if you're standing out somewhere and you're telling someone that you're going to take their baby, basically what you're saying to her, that's just one more notch saying you can't. And that's what abortion tells her. So we want to do everything that we can to empower women to make a good and right decision. And it is their decision. Whatever they decide, it is theirs. And so that brings me to who should be having this conversation. Who should be talking to women about adoption? And, we may all differ on this. This may be where we have a difference of opinion. It doesn't make us wrong. It just makes us different. There are so many people who talk about adoption. There are birth mothers who talk about it. There are hopeful adoptive parents. There are parents who've already adopted. There are adoptees, and then there are the professionals, the social workers, the counselors, the attorneys, the adoption agencies, the pro-life advocates, the sidewalk advocates. Everybody has an opinion, but I really want to hear from you ladies. Who should be talking about adoption when a woman is in crisis?
I think we all have our personal testimonies, and personal testimonies and stories are powerful. That's been researched. That's another reason why, at Abiding Love, if you adopt one of our babies, we require you to write that child's story. And what I mean by that is you write basically you write your testimony about how all of this came together in this baby's story, because research shows how powerful somebody's story is. Who should be talking to women in crisis? I think that, I prefer, one of the things that we do with, especially a lot of the PRCs that we partner with, is if my moms have a really in-depth question about parenting, I get my PRC in her area on the phone, and I try to formulate that relationship so that they then can be the experts in parenting and help her with parenting classes or whatever it is that she needs, you know. I have a really good relationship with my PRCs where like they can kind of highlight adoption, but then if somebody wants to get into the nitty gritty of it, they pick up the phone and they call me. Like I even have literally, that's why you keep me looking down, because I have phone numbers that call. And if I've told them that if they need me because they have somebody in their office, call my phone. If I don't answer, call right back. If I see that same number pop twice, even in this webinar, I would have jumped off and let Carrie just handle it, because that means I have somebody that needs to talk to me right now, you know? So I do prefer, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I prefer a woman in crisis. I would prefer a professional, adoption professional talk to her when it gets real in depth. I'm not talking about just like surface talk, but when it gets real in depth, it needs to be a professional, because the professionals are the ones who are gonna know the law inside and out. There are people still walking around thinking that you can just show up at the hospital and walk out with the baby. They don't even realize you need to have a home study. And there are some, and there was a question earlier about, you know, somebody saying they were trying to find an adoptive family on social media. In the world we live in with sex trafficking and everything else, there is no way as an expected parent I would randomly choose somebody who had a Facebook page that said they were home study ready. There is no way. I would want to make sure that they were connected to an agency licensed in my state or an attorney, because then you know they've been really vetted and that they're, you know, they're a legit couple. But I think because I know things and I can see things, and we take our time with the mama. We take our time. We take our time to, we don't even do paperwork. I mean, for the first couple of meetings, we don't even do paperwork. It's all about relationship. It's all about trying to figure out where she is and how we can help her. And Carrie is dying to jump in. She's leaning in slowly and rubbing her lips together. That's my cue that she's got something to say. Just so y'all know, in future Zooms, that's Carrie's cue when she's doing this.
Is that, and that's why in court judges keep going, and they're like, I'm not going to let her talk. Now, I just want to say, I think it comes down to professional. Again, stay in your lane. This is about, when we're outside an abortion clinic, we're about getting her out of crisis. So we need people who are trained sidewalk advocates, who've been through training, that know how to work with someone who's in a crisis. If after we get her out of crisis, we want to know more about adoption, then you bring in the adoption professionals. If once we get her out of crisis and she wants to know more about parenting, then we bring in the parenting professionals. For prospective adoptive families, again, stay in your lane. If you feel the Lord is calling you to adopt, then you need to you need to get a home study. And you need an agency that is going to give you the tools so that you can be the best adoptive parents ever. And that means education, not watching something on TV and saying, oh, good, check, I filled that box. I mean, this is one-on-one education. But then you need to work with an adoption consultant, not a facilitator, but a consultant. And the difference is, and those terms get intertwined, a consultant only has interaction with the adoptive family, and then also a licensed agency or a licensed attorney. They have no interaction with an expectant mom, okay? A facilitator is someone who's trying to match a expectant mom with an prospective adoptive family, but has no license. They aren't a licensed adoption agency, and they aren't a licensed attorney. In most states, facilitators are illegal. There's a reason that we have put these systems in place to make sure that, so when we look at an expectant mom, we can say we have vetted, they are vetted. But if they work with an adoption consultant who is there for them, and then we have agencies that are focused on the expectant mom and there for her, then when the time comes, if the time comes, then we're all staying in our lane, experts on what we have been called to do, what our mission is, what our educational training is, and we're giving the best advice to all parties. So if that happens, we're ready to go. And so that's my recommendation. Get her out of crisis. Give her to the experts that either that's parenting or adoption. And whoever's on the sidewalk and whoever is in these PRCs, you need to vet your agencies that you're working with, because you need to say, are you going to see them face to face? How often are you going to see them face to face? Are you going to answer their text? Are you going to disappear after placement? What's your game plan afterwards? What kind of training or support are you going to do afterwards? Vet, because you want someone that's going to be there for her. And so agencies, we need to be vetting who we're working with or the consultant in, so we can make sure that when we say they are going to love you big and well, they are going to love you big and well.
I see your little one. Hi, Tara. Beautiful. That's good, Carrie. And so we're hitting our hour mark. And so I do want to close. We want to close. But before we close, I want to talk about one more thing. And it is that, you know, historically, I have heard adoption offered by advocates as a desperate effort to women to choose life. And so, and for whatever reason, we, you know, it's that thing that we throw out there, that bait that we throw out thinking that she's going to take it. And so, you know, when a woman is considering making an adoption plan, what are some of the things that you look for to know that she's actually ready to move forward? So Vicki, I'd love to hear from you. And then Carrie, from a legal standpoint, I'd like to hear from you as well.
I think emotionally, we've done a lot of hard work on her why. You know how in the Bible they tell you to, like in a secular world, I talk about the why a lot with women who are not Christians. But in the Bible, if you really look through it, God always tells you to get a marker. You know, he said, grab a stone, stick it in the middle of the Jordan River. You know, look at Lot's wife. She's a pillar of salt. Don't disobey me. That's stupid. You know, there's always a marker, you know, somewhere. And so your markers, though, are what anchor you. And they anchor you so that when the doubt comes and the wave of grief comes and the shame comes or whatever it is comes, it's what helps you fight out of that. And so one of the things that we like to do, we are not all, and please understand, you know, people are humans. We are not, and we're human. We're not always successful in getting a woman to truly identify her why. But one of the things that we really try to do is we try to stay neutral. I'm really, really adamant about not giving advice as far as like, you know, you should do this or you should. Now, I will write down her pros and cons. I will write down all her reasons why, and I will write down all her reasons why she shouldn't, and I will hand it right back to her. You know, I will go over the amount of grief that she's going to hit. And sometimes people think we go a little too much into that, but one of the things just in research and study and talking to past birth moms, the one thing that they hate the most about the Christian world and adoption is that nobody prepared them for this loss. Nobody prepared them for the grief that was coming. And so we really hammer that a lot. I mean, we go through, I like word picture stories. You know, I'm not going to go into all of them here, but we use a lot of those for them to come back to try to anchor them into their why. And so really before I match, one of the things is we go over, and again, why we spend so much time with them is we go over, well, why? Why do you think this is the best thing for you and your child? Why do you think, you know, what are you going to do when you wake up one morning and you're not feeling this today? You know, and it could be 7 years from now. What are you going to do? What are you going to anchor back to? And so, you know, for the most part, I would say that the majority of our women can look me in the eye or look one of our advocates in the eye and say, this is why. And we have hammered it to death. And so if she's at that place where she really knows her why, then, you know, that's when everything ramps up. That's when we start doing paperwork. That's when we start considering matches. That's when everything ramps up. I get some women who are very aggravated with me because they'll tell me a why, and then a week later I'm gonna ask them the why again, but in a different way. They just want me to shove paperwork at them, and they want to make a choice. And so like I said, we have some women who do get aggravated with us. I have one right now. She's pretty aggravated with me because she just wants to choose, and I'm like, we got plenty of time. You know, but that's what we try to do before we move forward. I want to know her why, and I want to know that it's her why, not her mama's why, not her boyfriend's why, her why. Because like I told her, I said, I'm not the one that's going to have to get up and look in the mirror. You are. And I'm not the one that's going to go home with empty arms. You are. So I need to know why you're doing this. And so that's for me, that's what we look for, and then we move forward.
Yeah, that's good. Carrie, can you talk a little bit about, you know, maybe her state of mind and legally what all of that looks like, and or you know, whatever you have to say about what would actually help you know she's ready.
Well, legally, obviously we want someone of sound mind. And so again, that's one of the reasons why when someone's in crisis, it's not the best time to be talking about adoption legal paperwork and stuff. You know, for us, hearing those words on the legal paperwork is hard. I mean, the phrasing, it's rough, it's raw. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no flowering it up. It's raw. So we actually go over it with them well in advance if we can, because we want to read through that. And so that they're at the hospital, that's not the first time that they're hearing those things. So we can make sure that we've answered their question, that if they want an attorney, we can get that for them. And we love it when they want another attorney, because we want them to, again, be settled and feeling that they were not coerced, that they were in control of their decision, whatever their decision is. But, you know, and when we're in the hospital setting, you know, one of the things that we are very adamant about is making sure, well, in most states, Georgia, Alabama, you cannot sign anything until 24 hours after birth. So in Florida, where we're licensed, you can sign 72 hours after birth or when you're being discharged. So if adoption professionals are in it for the women, and we're not in it to get a baby, or if it's a transaction, we're going to be talking to her about what is your why? Why are you looking for adoption? We are really bad business people because we talk people out of adoption. Again, we're not business. I guess that's what makes us non-business people, because we talk people out of adoption and say, nope, sorry, if you're going to do it, it's not going to be through us. Because this adoption is not for everybody. And we have failed in the adoption world. We have coerced women. The adoption professionals have done it. We have tricked people. We have told them that you're going to have this access and not that access and all of those things. And then we did the bait and switch. So we have failed. But what we can do here is to make sure that everybody understands why they're making an adoption plan, what this really looks like in writing and in theory, and moving forward on that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I want to make sure legally everybody understands that.
You did. That's good. And there are a couple of questions from folks who signed up for the webcast that I wanted us to try to get to. If you ladies have just about 10 more minutes, are y'all okay? Yeah, good. So one woman, she is an adoptive mother. Her daughter's 7 years old, and the daughter knows that she's adopted, but her biological parents surrendered their rights, and she's left the window open for them to stay in contact. So I'm not sure, again, you know, we don't know the details of their adoption or the paperwork or how all that happened. But she says that every 2 years, one or the other parent will touch base. So basically that's the contact that they have. And then last year, the biological father asked to see her, and they met at a local park. It was nice to see him, but they did not tell the daughter that he was her biological father. And she's 7 now. She's asking more questions. And so I guess, you know, really one of the questions is, you know, who should be telling these children about their biological parents? Whose responsibility is that? And when should that happen? And, you know, we don't have to go too far into it, but just kind of touch on her specific situation.
I just want y'all to note how Vicky's chomping at the bit this time and all of her little facial expressions. So there you go, Vicky.
I was trying to control it. My opinion is that should never be a surprise. One of the things that we believe heavily in is that from day one, you should know your child's story and your child should know their story. I think that when you keep things secret, it creates a shame that doesn't need to be there. So, you know, coming into it late, which it sounds like this has happened, I think the sooner you can start telling her age-appropriate truth, the better. Because it is late, I would highly recommend, and I mean like highly, 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 highly recommend, you don't just shoot from the hip. You talk to your pediatrician, you talk to a child psychologist, you talk to a child counselor. And the reason I say that is our brain develops at different times. We can understand abstract and concrete at different times, especially children. You don't want to set your child backwards. So you need to talk to your pediatrician. You need to talk to a child psychologist or a child counselor. And it can just be you saying, hey, my daughter's 7. This is the thing. This is what we've done. I need to catch her up. What is the healthiest way for me to do that? And
Can
I think
ask
that,
you a question before you go on?
yeah, go ahead.
In that situation, what consideration do you give to the birth parents? What if it was their, I mean, say this isn't really an open adoption per se. It sounds like it may not be, like maybe there was some child protective services involvement possibly. But I don't know that for a fact. But, you know, if, you know, it's their desire that they not be known, then how do you share that information?
Well, the fact, I mean, that situation is a little bit different because you've already let her physically see the birth father. So to not tell that child that that's who that person is, that's going to bite you at some point. And so, you know, and this is like a whole different webinar. I'm just going to be honest with you. But everybody has their parts of their story. Like I have my part of my children's adoption story. They have theirs. The birth parents have theirs. I've specifically spoken with my birth parents about what I can and cannot share. So if let's say that they have, let's say they didn't meet, she still deserves to know her story. Because one day, if you, whatever gaps you can fill in for her, and you can even tell her, like, one of my children has yet to meet one of his birth parents. And it's not because he doesn't want to, it's not because we don't want to. And honestly, I don't think it's because she doesn't want to, but she's still living in the spiral of shame. And so she, even though she knows from other people that he doesn't hate her, or I don't hate her, or I don't think bad of her, she's so scared to trust it that she loves us from a distance. And it has nothing to do with him. It has nothing to do with me. It is her fear, you know? And so we just keep loving in the sidelines and waiting for her to come out. And so,
I think that's good. I
yeah.
think you've answered that question. I think that's good. What you've said is enough. Because, you know, this mom, we can put her in contact if we need to. She's on the webinar, so she's got your information. She's got
email me or call me. I talked to somebody just like 2 weeks ago. I spent an hour and a half on the phone with another adoptive parent. So please feel free to reach out to me. Just be patient.
Yeah.
It may take a minute to get back with you, but I will answer.
Carrie, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I just want to add that this is a relationship. So relationships ebb and flow. And we find that a lot of birth parents are not going to be right out of the gate saying, I want to see him now. I want this. Some of them are, but it's part of the relationship, and relationships go from intensity of seeing everybody every day, talking every day, to a couple of weeks, and sometimes, you know, once a year, twice a year, and then it revs back up. That's what relationships are, and we need to give full expectations to that. And so, yes, it is frustrating, especially when you have set, you know, visits and a child is expecting a visit and someone doesn't show up. But again, that's why we've got to, as parents, you've got to say, hey, we're going to try for this. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we're going to try for it. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, then, you know, we're going to go bowling and go get ice cream anyway. So this person might be joining us. I don't know. Set those expectations and realize that relationships ebb and flow, and don't demonize parents because they didn't show up. We had this weekend, I have a family that adopted 6 years ago. Yeah, 6 years ago. And they live in Minnesota. And Minnesota is a long way from Georgia. And so their child's birth mom wanted to visit, and she hadn't visited for a long time. And so they drove all the way from Minnesota during all of this COVID stuff so that they could, and she didn't show up. and even after they drove all the way to Georgia. But I love how they've handled it, because they kept the door open and they realize this is part of her grief and what she's going through. So just realize it's not a slight. It's not that they don't love their child. It's just wherever they are at that moment.
And Pam, are you going to ask that one question? What are the 3 things about the pro-life movement?
Well, Mallory stepped off, but I believe that we already, I think we already answered her question,
Okay.
what she said. But we do have another question from another advocate who's asking, even if it's not an open adoption,
Yes.
do you share with her? Did you all answer that? Did I miss it?
We absolutely. And I'm stealing Vicky's thunder a little bit, because we all want to know. She says this all the time, so this is kind of a Vicky quote. But we all want to know where we came from, who we are from. Ancestry DNA is always a big thing. 23andMe, because we want to know those things. So even if it's a closed adoption, semi-open, whatever, we want to know. So they need to know their story, because remember, this is half of mom, biological mom, and half of dad. However you present that story is going to be a part of how they view their own identity. So it is extremely important that from the beginning, again, when you are rocking that baby to sleep, you tell him or her story. And as he or she gets older, you add the details that need to be added to.
One thing though, before we leave, I know you got to go, but the 3 things about the pro-life movement that we can do about talking about adoption with society. One thing, I think we need to be more real about what adoption looks like. I think it's been too long, the unicorns and rainbows. I'm sorry, unicorns and rainbows, and I think that it's a beautiful thing, but you don't get there without a few tussles. And so I think we just need to be more honest about what birth moms really go through. We need to be more honest about how scary it is for an adoptive mom sometimes to have her ability to parent questioned 24/7. I think it's just, we need to be more honest, but it can be like, it's beautiful, but that's one of the things, and I'll go more into that. I'll try to answer that question later, but I think one of the biggest things we can do is be more real about what adoption really is, and not that it's just this, like a magic bomb that you put on something and then everybody just walks away smiling.
If you find that, I want that.
I know I keep saying I'm going to sell Tinkerbell dust, for $9.95 and see how far it goes.
And that actually is a segue into another question that an attendee had about adoptees. And one of her questions is, why aren't there support groups for adoptees like there are for birth mothers? And I think that's a good question. How are we caring for these children after they're adopted? How are we following up with these kids? And just as much as, this is their story, those are great starts, but there's also care that they're going to need. And, if I'm honest, for me, the way that I see that is that education needs to come up front to the hopeful adoptive parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a conversation for another webcast with another affiliate who can actually talk about that. So we have a great affiliate who's able to talk about pre-adoption education, not only for hopeful adoptive parents, but also for pregnancy centers and other pro-life organizations. So that may
be. And we did what was Claire? We did a YouTube where she's an adult adoptee, and some of those questions were answered. So I don't even know what our YouTube channel is, so I'll let Carrie tell people that. But that was even eye-opening for us about how we can serve better, also talking to her. So that was really interesting.
It's Abiding Love Adoptions. Go to the YouTube. We got it.
There you go.
That's beautiful. So thank you, ladies, so much for all your time.
Thank you.
I hope that we were able to answer some questions for a lot of folks. Again, if you have questions, if maybe this webcast actually brought up some emotions in you or challenged some of the things you think or believe Or, you know, maybe there was information delivered today and you want to expound on it more. You want more than what you got here. You can email Abiding Love Adoptions from their website, abidingloveadopt.com, through their contact form. You can always message them on Facebook. They have a Facebook page, Abiding Love Adoptions. They have an Instagram. You can always come through ProLove Ministries if you want, and I will absolutely put you in contact with these ladies. Any way that you want to get your question answered, ask us all. You know, just bring it to us, and we'll get you the answer that you need. If we don't know, we will find someone who does. So we want you to know that we're going to be here for you. So any questions that came up today, feel free to contact us later. Ladies, do y'all have any closing, anything you want to say before we leave?
I just appreciate it. I appreciate the time.
If we offended anybody, it's Vicky's fault.
But if you want to write a letter, send it to Carrie, because she's going to be the one answering it anyway.
Certified, nice and legal. So I do want to say before we get off the call that if anyone, or off this webcast, if anyone watching this, hearing this later, is facing an untimely pregnancy and you found yourself in crisis before, during the pregnancy, either way, we want you to know that help is available. We have a project called Love Line. The phone number is 888-550-1588. You can call that line. You can text that line. You can chat with us through our website at loveline.com. We will put you in connection with the resource that you need. We'll provide you with material support if it's needed, emotional support. We're here to support you, and we supplement the work, the great work that pregnancy centers are already doing. And so we want you to know, if you are pregnant or if you have small children, if you're on maternity leave and you need help, please reach out. Don't wait. We're here for you. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.